Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online News Summary for Saturday, November 15th. With most political attention still focused on Ottawa, it's a lighter news week, but one that gives us sharp insight into privacy, transparency, and information sharing, both here at home and around the world. We start with local journalism initiative reporting from coast to coast, Newfoundland's AI policies after a major education scandal, Alberta's continued push for sovereignty despite no planning for separation, and in BC, how private security firms and Canada's spy agency may be sharing information behind closed doors. We'll move through national stories involving federal data, economic espionage, and the unclear mandate of a new special envoy role. Internationally, a major South African whistleblower avoids jail. Turkish prosecutors seek a 2,300-year sentence for data misuse, and German authorities arrest a man for publishing political hit lists. And we wrap in the United States with stories about unintended consequences, from a major government data breach to state drivers' information being shared with ICE without officials realizing it. Let's dive in. We start in Newfoundland and Labrador, where Yumna Iftikhar, LGI reporter at The Independent, brings us a story that the new PC government is not prioritizing a review of provincial AI policies, even after a major scandal involving fabricated citations in a costly education accord. An access to information request revealed more than $755,000 was spent on the 10-year plan, which has now been pulled offline after at least 15 citations were found to be fake. Educators and researchers say the episode raises serious concerns about transparency and the government's understanding of how AI tools are being used inside public institutions. According to Jana Rosales, associate professor in Memorial University's Department of Engineering and Applied Science, public institutions should be able to adapt quickly to the rapid changing AI landscape. Rosales explains if a policy is developed based on the state of AI but takes 18 months to move through an approval process, the technological landscape would have already shifted, leaving the policy outdated before its implementation. The roughly 400-page education plan developed over an 18-month period contains 110 recommendations and calls to action aimed at enhancing early childhood education, K-12 education, post-secondary education, and adult learning. Experts interviewed by The Independent say this isn't just about whether AI was used. It's about disclosure, scientific rigor, and trust. With more than 100 recommendations tied to the province's education future, researchers argue that even corrected versions may struggle to regain credibility. Residents in Newfoundland and nationwide have shown concern over AI tools tending to produce inaccurate information and fabricated references. Ultimately, it falls to the publisher to verify the content and ensure the information is reliable. As we've noted in past episodes, once trust in a major policy document is shaken, rebuilding it is no small task. Meanwhile, in Ontario, LGI reporter Mohammed Hamza at The Pointer reports that residents in Brampton are expressing frustration after months of confusion around the Peel Memorial expansion, a project long promised as the city's new hospital. It turns out the March groundbreaking ceremony, attended by Premier Ford, Mayor Patrick Brown, and officials from William Osler Health System, happened before a builder had even been selected. It was only on October 27th that the province officially named Bird Design Build Construction as the successful bidder, but major details including the project budget, the construction timeline, and what services the facility will actually offer remain unclear. Local officials say the city urgently needs a true second hospital, and even a third. For now, residents are left waiting for transparency that still hasn't arrived. Even after its completion, calling Peel Memorial a hospital is somewhat misleading, as it remains unclear if it will officially qualify for that designation. According to the information Osler has released, the expansion will not include major wards such as surgery, trauma care, cancer, or cardio treatment, or other features of a full-service hospital supported by a 24/7 fully functioning emergency department. Past access to information requests show just how strained the system is, with thousands of patients treated in hallways. And in Alberta, Brett McKay, LGI reporter at the Investigative Journalism Foundation, reports that While Premier Danielle Smith continues to reference Alberta sovereignty and even potential statehood, newly obtained documents show the province hasn't done any economic or fiscal modeling on what separation would actually mean. Strategic planning and risk management are intended to evaluate early-stage policy proposals to help guide government responses and prevent major economic upsets, like those that might arise if Alberta were to break from Confederation. Multiple access to information requests sought any analysis of Alberta breaking away, joining neighboring provinces, or becoming a U.S. state. The response was the same every time: no records responsive. Experts say this confirms that sovereignty talk is more political strategy than genuine planning. And if a referendum is seriously on the table, as the Premier has said, the absence of modeling leaves Albertans voting without key economic facts. Smith has said her government could allow a separation referendum as early as next year. Staying in Alberta, Jesse Boyle, LGI reporter at the Town & Country News, reports from Grand Prairie, where MLA Nolan Dyke is facing a recall petition. The recall petitioner says Dyke has been unresponsive to constituents and routinely directs people to file FOIP requests for information he won't provide. Dyke argues the, quote, recall process should not be used to overturn democratic elections just because an individual disagrees with government policy, end quote. Recall petitions for United Conservative Party MLAs are growing across the province, following the government's use of the notwithstanding clause to force teachers back to work. In an interesting twist, days before the recall was filed, Dyke voted to drastically reduce a funding request from Elections Alberta, even as the agency deals with a surge in petitions, recalls, and potential referendums. The committee ultimately approved just $1.5 million of the $13.5 million requested by Alberta's chief electoral officer, raising questions about how the office will manage the growing workload. And finally, in the provincial roundup, LGI reporter Matt Simmons from the Narwhal brings us a powerful investigative report that reveals how information gathered by private security firms working for pipeline companies could be flowing directly to Canada's National Spy Agency, CSIS, with almost no public transparency. According to documents obtained through Freedom of Information legislation, security companies were hired to protect the construction of Coastal GasLink, a 670-kilometer natural gas pipeline. For years, Coastal GasLink had been a focal point for conflict, including dozens of arrests and extensive surveillance operations by private security and the RCMP. Newly released documents show TC Energy, or Transcontinental Pipeline, leveraged its relationship with the former CSIS director to push for expanded intelligence sharing between industry and national security agencies. Legislation passed this year gives companies more of what they requested. Experts warn this blurs the line between public security, corporate interests, and government surveillance, potentially exposing Indigenous land defenders, environmental advocates, and even journalists to infringements on civil rights. It's a story that raises profound questions about accountability and who gets to define what counts as a public threat. Turning to federal developments. A federal committee reviewing health and science funding has reversed course on its demand for detailed, individually identifiable grant applications to 3 agencies between 2000 and 2025 from 25 years of researchers. An open letter signed by more than 5,000 researchers had objected to the earlier request, calling it a targeted attack on equity, diversity, and inclusivity in health and science research. MPs will now accept aggregated, anonymized data after this widespread backlash. This shift avoids what officials say would have been more than $4 million in processing costs. We would like to add our voice to those noting the episode reveals a deeper issue. Parliamentarians are taking a cavalier attitude towards privacy, particularly when, according to Ardath Wynot, an associate professor of sociology at Mount Allison University, these elected officials want to engage in political witch hunts. Turning to a Canadian tale of intrigue, a former Hydro-Quebec researcher charged with economic espionage told a Quebec court he only explored academic jobs in China because he was unhappy with his position, not because he planned to leak sensitive information. The man explained that it was tied to Hydro-Quebec's unwillingness to extend his work visa for more than a year at a time, and his experience at the Institute around 2017 and 2018. The Crown alleges he used proprietary research and applications submitted under China's Thousand Talents program. He denies disclosing any confidential material and says any technical information included was too general to be meaningful. He has pleaded not guilty to all charges, including breach of trust and preparing acts on behalf of a foreign entity. The trial continues this week. And finally, 7 weeks after being appointed Canada's new special envoy for Ukraine's reconstruction, Chrystia Freeland's mandate remains largely undefined. Government officials say she'll help connect Canadian businesses to reconstruction opportunities, particularly in infrastructure and mining, but the Privy Council has offered very few specifics. Experts say Canada has a major opportunity to help preserve Ukraine's sovereignty and international law, while Canadian companies remain cautious about operating in an active war zone. Ukraine says it needs partners now, not just after the conflict, and argues that Canada's expertise and strong bilateral relationship could play a major role in rebuilding critical infrastructure. The Ukrainian ambassador to Canada told the Senate committee that Canada already has preferred trade access in Ukraine through its recently updated trade agreement and the goodwill that comes with being a major financial donor. Now to international stories, and 3 major cases involving accountability, corruption, and personal data. A high-profile South African whistleblower who admitted delivering bribes to senior government officials has avoided jail in a plea deal that suspends his 40-year sentence in exchange for cooperation. Angelo Agrizi, who provided dramatic testimony at an inquiry into government corruption in 2019, was sentenced Thursday to 40 years in prison. His testimony during the Zondo Commission exposed widespread corruption under former President Jacob Zuma, including cash-stuffed bags passed to officials to secure lucrative contracts. His plea deal relates specifically to cases involving the former commissioner and deputy commissioner of South Africa's Department of Corrections and a former ruling party lawmaker. For weeks in early 2019, Agrizi became the most famous man in South Africa after he testified how part of his job as chief operating officer at a facilities management company involved delivering bags of cash and organizing favors for a then cabinet minister, senior government officials, and other politicians in the then-ruling African National Congress Party. While the plea is a breakthrough, critics note that only a fraction of those implicated in years of corruption have ever been charged. Shifting to Turkey, Istanbul's jailed mayor, Ekrem İmamoğlu, a leading opposition figure, is now facing perhaps one of the strongest penalties for data misuse, as an indictment seeks 2,352 years in prison. İmamoğlu has been accused of 142 offenses tied to corruption, organized crime, and data misuse. The indictment is nearly 4,000 pages and names more than 400 suspects. A trial date has yet to be set. Specific to data misuse, İmamoğlu is accused of transferring personal data of Istanbul residents to secure international funding for his campaign. He has dismissed the charges as nonsense. His party calls the charges entirely political, part of a broader crackdown following strong opposition results in recent local elections. Critics view the accusations as a politically motivated effort to weaken the main opposition. His arrest triggered the largest wave of public demonstrations in Turkey in over a decade. And in Germany, authorities have arrested a man accused of calling for attacks on public officials and publishing hit lists containing sensitive personal data on the dark web. A German-Polish dual citizen identified only as Martin S., in line with German privacy rules, was arrested in Dortmund. He is suspected of terrorism financing, giving instructions on carrying out a serious act of violence, and dangerous dissemination of personal data. He also allegedly posted instructions for making explosives and solicited cryptocurrency donations meant to fund political assassinations. The investigation is being handled at the federal level because of its national security implications. Shifting to the United States, and 2 stories that look at data issues south of the border. The U.S. Congressional Budget Office, CBO, has confirmed it was hacked, potentially exposing sensitive government analysis used to evaluate federal legislation. The agency says it has contained the incident and implemented new monitoring and security controls. The Washington Post first wrote the story on the CBO hack, stating that the intrusion was done by a suspected foreign actor, citing 4 anonymous people familiar with the situation. The CBO manages enormous datasets related to a multitude of policy issues. This ranges from immigration enforcement to national tariff models, and massive tax and spending cuts passed into law this summer. It means even a limited breach could have significant implications. And in a story that shines a light on the intricacies of data sharing in public bodies, Reuters reports a group of Democratic lawmakers is warning that state driver databases are being unintentionally shared with U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, through a little-known system called NLETS, which links local, state, and federal agencies. Driver's license data is being shared through state, local, and federal police forces through NLETS. That includes ICE and Homeland Security Investigations, which is a body under the Department of Homeland Security. Some states believe they had blocked ICE access to driver's licenses, but in the past year alone, nearly 900,000 queries were made by ICE and Homeland Security Investigations through NLETS. Lawmakers say most state officials simply didn't realize where their data was going because of the system's technical complexity. As a result, only some states, including New York, Illinois, Massachusetts, and Minnesota, had blocked ICE from accessing the data they shared via NLETS. It's a stark reminder of what privacy experts often warn. Public agencies are far better at collecting data than they are at understanding or controlling how it flows across jurisdictions and departments. The push to cut ICE off from state data is a good example of how state and local officials are trying to stop Trump's mass deportation effort. And that's today's summary. We hope these stories help you stay informed about the fast-moving world of privacy, information management, and public transparency. We've got more analysis and commentary coming in the weeks ahead, so subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. To help us keep the mics on, consider supporting FIPA News Monitoring or making a donation through our website. Our writer today is Sean Fisk. Original music is the always mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thank you for joining us, and a big FIPA thank you to all the reporters, contributors, and outlets that make this podcast possible, and to you, our listeners, for helping this project grow. Stay safe and stay informed.